Hello, and thanks for taking the time to watch this tutorial on setting up a Linux server. This will be the first part in a multi-part series on setting up a coin pool. However, before you can have a good coin pool, you need to have something that it runs on top of. Some people use Linux, some people probably want to use Windows. I prefer Linux, so let's go ahead and get started. What I'm actually going to do is use a tutorial that was written, very well written actually, and I'm just going to start by doing a perfect server search. So perfect server Ubuntu 14.04 Apache, so let's go there. This was a tutorial that I initially found which goes through the step-by-step process, and I'd like to put a big huge thank you out there to How2Forge for this. It's a great article, well written how-to article. In this tutorial I'm going to do a lot of copying and pasting, and I'm probably going to do very few mentions of what these commands actually run and do. But let's go ahead and get started. So I'm actually a little further ahead in this tutorial, so let me back up a bit. Go back to the first page. If you haven't already done so, I recommend going through the first couple of pages, which talks about installing a base Ubuntu system. You can see here it's pretty straightforward. Most of this is a follow along type of thing. I'm gonna go ahead a couple of screens here. You can see this. Most of this is the base install of the system, and again, I'm just kind of showing you what you would see if you were to try installing this from the start. What I'm going to do is actually I'm going to pick up on page 3 of the tutorial, because I'm actually going to be using DigitalOcean for my base starting image, and I will run through that process of going into DigitalOcean and provisioning a server and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and get started getting our server provisioned before we do anything with the perfect server tutorial. So first things first, I'm going to go to DigitalOcean, and if you haven't checked out DigitalOcean yet, I highly recommend it. Although again, there are tons of options out there for VPS hosting. I like DigitalOcean, so I'm going to go ahead and start by creating a snapshot or creating a droplet. In this case, I will name it Artemis, and I'm going to choose the $80 per month option, simply because I want the 8 gigs of RAM. 80 gig storage isn't such a big deal in this case, but I would rather have the 80 gigs of RAM. For the region, I'm just going to leave as is, New York 3. I will leave everything else pretty much the way that it is, 1404, 64-bit. And I will choose my cryptic 0 public key as an added security measure. And then at that point, just go ahead and say create droplet, and this will run through the process of provisioning and setting up what they call a droplet, really nothing more than a server instance. So as soon as this finishes, I will resume the video. Okay, it looks like we are now fully provisioned. So the first thing that I'm going to do here is just point out the fact that this IP address becomes fairly important, obviously, in order to connect to the server. Then all these other options at this point, I'm going to say let's just ignore. Okay, so first things first, let's also connect to the server using SSH. Now the one thing that you're going to want to do here is probably get yourself a copy of PuTTY, or some other secure shell application or SSH application, and in my case I like PuTTY, so I'm going to move this over just a bit here. Go ahead and copy the IP address of the server, and I'm going to paste that in and save just so that I have a copy of it. And from there, what I can do is I have to select this, and then what I'm going to do is go to SSH auth, and then I'm going to click on the allow agent forwarding, and then I need to point at my key or my secure shell, my SSH key. So cryptic 0 PPK. I'm not going to go through the process of actually creating this. I recommend just doing a quick search on generating a private key using PuttyGen or something similar. So go ahead and open that. And then since I have added this to this particular session, I'm going to go ahead and save it. And now if I click open, I should get prompted here about that this key is cached in my registry, yada yada yada. I'm going to say yes to that I understand. So in this case, I'm actually going to log in with root. You've probably heard 100,000 times that root is not the recommended way to use use a secure shell, but in this case, for the purposes of this tutorial, I'm not that concerned. So hit OK. Now my passphrase that was assigned to my private key, I need to put that in. And then once I've authenticated with my private key, I will be dropped back into my VPS or my private server. And in this case, what I'm going to do now is drop back to the perfect server tutorial. I'm going to try to make room here so that I can look at both screens at the same time. Bear with me for a second. Okay, so first things first, get root privileges. We already have root privileges, so I don't really need to do anything with that. So I'm going to skip that step. However, if you've gone and installed a fresh install for Ubuntu server or something similar, you probably should go through and assign your root password. Now, next step is to install the SSH server. So I'm going to go ahead and copy and right-click to paste. Okay, so here I'm just basically going into the apt-get install command, installing the SSH in the OpenSSH server. Go through, say yes, and then hit enter, and it'll run through the process of fetching and installing that package. Next thing is the vimnox. Go ahead and right-click, copy, right-click again to paste. Yes, go through the process installing this. Now, as we get down, as we go through these different steps, there will be things, it's not just a matter of copying and pasting, there will be things we'll need to change. And here is an example of some of the start here of having to do that sort of thing. I'm going to take a look at the interfaces just to make sure that it looks okay. And in my case, since this is a VPS, it's on DigitalOcean, I'm not going to really make any changes to this. I'm just going to leave it as is, and in fact it looks like the DNS name servers are what I would choose if I was going to be doing this from scratch, so that's good. Now I'm going to hit Control X, or I'm sorry, an escape, colon, and then quit. Okay, scrolling down further, the VI etc hosts, I'm going to go into that, and this does need to be changed. So what I would recommend here is I'm just going to get rid of what's in that. Come over here, and I'm just going to copy this and paste it in, and then I'm going to use, my domain name is cryptic0.com, so I'm going to go ahead and type the name of my server. In this case is artemis.cryptic0.com and Artemis. And then of course the IP address that's there right now is not what's actually been provided on DigitalOcean, so I'll go back, grab that, and paste the actual IP in. Escape, colon W to save, colon Q to quit. Okay, that step's finished. Now what we need to do is grab this command, which echoes the full host name back out, And here all I need to do is put in artemis.cryptic0.com, hit return. Then I'm going to do a service host name, restart, and then I'm going to do a host name, and you'll see that it does in fact reflect the fact that I've changed it to artemis.cryptic0.com. I also want to check host name F, which is the full, and artemis.cryptic0.com. So that looks good. Now let's go further down the tutorial. I'm not going to mess around with these sources because, again, the big thing to watch out for here is that you do not want anything from the CD-ROM being left behind on here. So that's the main reason we want to change any of that. But in my case, since I've used DigitalOcean, those should not be there. Now the next step is to do an apt get update. This will run out, check the packages to see if there's anything that needs to be added and fetched, and as well as doing an apt get update, I'm going to do an apt get upgrade, which will actually check to see if there's any new package updates, and there are in fact some, so I'm going to say yes to that and let that run. And then after that, I'm going to reboot the server. Also, I do apologize in advance for the loud sound effects. Okay, so go ahead and close out of this. And we'll go back in. As soon as the server comes back up, I should be able to get back in there. Alright, let's keep going here. Change the default shell, so I'm going to go ahead and copy that, paste. Alright, and here I'm going to say no. Disable AppArmor, because part of the problem with AppArmor is that it tends to be over paranoid. So going to get rid of anything to do with it. Next, we need to synchronize the system clock, and just to verify, I'm going to type date, and that will tell me that I am in fact on the Eastern time zone, so the time looks good. So next thing is to synchronize, just for good measure, not that it was really needed. Okay, now let's move on to the second page, or actually the fourth page of this tutorial. Alright, here we are on the fourth page. So now we're starting to get into the more the meats and the potatoes of this, so to speak. We're talking about installing, postfix, MySQL, and phpMyAdmin, which actually is a pretty simple application. But anyway, it is much needed, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and just disable anything to do with send mail. And as I go, continue on here. And you probably are thinking, I'm just blindly copying and pasting. I kind of am, except that I've been through this a few different times. So I know exactly what these commands are running now. Next thing we're going to need to do is assign a root password here, a root user password. So what I like to do is I like to create some documentation on what I'm doing. So in this case, I'm going to put the MySQL root PW. And in here, I'm just going to keep this so that later I can refer back to it. I like to use grc.com for a password generator, and I also like to take a large portion of this bottom 63 character random alphanumeric string, and I'm going to use that as my root password. So I'll save that, make a copy, right click to paste it, tab, repeat. Okay, and here I may as well go ahead and create a self-signed SSL certificate. My host name needs to be updated to Artemis. Tab, internet site is what we're looking to do here. It looks like my system mail name is correct, artemis.cryptic0.com. I'm going to hit OK and let this run through the process of fully configuring and setting up these different services. As you can see, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. Here it goes MySQL. You can see just before that it was postfix, and it's going through and doing its thing. Now it's running new aliases, which have everything to do with setting up the postfix service. Okay, so let me go ahead and close that. Come back over here. And we've already gone through this piece. Now we are on the TLS, SSL, and submission ports for postfix. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this line. Give myself a little more room. And here what we need to do is, it says to uncomment the submission SMTPS sections, but I just like to, I'm actually just going to copy what he's got here. So go ahead and copy that, and then go into this file and simply add it just ahead of or above where I was supposed to uncomment, and do the same thing down here. Okay, with that done, I'm going to go ahead and hit escape, W, and quit. And then the next step is to restart postfix. And you'll see that was pretty quick. Now the next thing we need to do is go into the MySQL configuration file, and it's important that we make sure that in this case it's not only going to bind to the local IP, so comment that out, save, and then let's go ahead and restart the MySQL service. Now let's go, as he indicates here, let's go ahead and test as to whether or not it's listening, and you can see that it is listening. Okay, that's good. Alright, now the next step is to put some antivirus protections into place here, and it looks like we're going to put in some spam assassin and some clam AV. So go ahead and copy this entire block, paste it in, yes, and runs through preparing and unpacking and all that good stuff. And most of these processes normally don't take a whole lot of time, but when we get into tutorials a little further down the line, you'll notice that compiling software takes a little longer, especially when we're talking about coins and wallets. Okay, so that finished. Now let's go ahead and stop the spam assassin service. And we're going to remove spam assassin from run levels here. next step is get Apache 2 installed. We're going to install PHP 5, and we're going to install a couple of other things like pair and mcrypt. So let's go ahead and copy, paste a lot of block, a big block of stuff there. Say yes to that. And since we are working with Apache 2, I'm going to hit the space bar for that, tab, let it configure Apache 2. In here, it's asking me, do I want to configure the database for the phpMyAdmin with the common settings? And I'm going to say no, I don't want to do that. Okay, back to this. Now let's go ahead and install PHP 5. Sorry, not PHP 5, but rather we're going to enable a module mcrypt. Alright, now scroll down a little ways. We're going to enable a couple more modules here. And here we actually want to go in and do some configuration to the mods available, the settings for the SUPHP configuration file. So first thing I want to do is I'm going to comment out some stuff here. The files match, set handler, and files match. And then I also want to add a line here. So I'm going to copy this. So I'm basically adding a type to be supported here. Then after that, I'm going to go ahead and save, quit, and then restart Apache. And if we don't receive any errors, that's good. In this case, I'm going to skip this step. I don't plan on hosting any Ruby files, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that. Okay. Xcache can potentially cause some issues with a lot of Drupal, which I would use Drupal in most cases. I also use some WordPress, things like that. I just want to give you a forewarning that Xcache, while it's good, it can also cause issues. But in this case, I'm going to go ahead and elect to not do this. I'm not going to install Xcache. I will install PHP FPM. This will allow me to use multiple versions of PHP. Okay. Oh, it looks... one of the reasons that I'm seeing package lib apache 2 mod FGI that it has no install candidate is because I do not have the multiverse enabled in my package list. So if I go back over here, I can see that there is in fact a multiverse to add to the sources list. So I'm going to go ahead and edit the sources list. And I need need to add the multiverse. Oops. Okay, so save, quit, app, get, update. Okay. Back over to my tutorial, and I'm going to do another run on that, see if it'll work. And it looks like it is this time. Yeah, enable a couple of modules here, and then restart Apache. Okay, this is just a small blurb that basically says, you know, if you want to enable more versions or different versions of PHP, there's a nice tutorial on doing that as well. Okay, the next step is to install Mailman. So I'm going to go ahead and start that process. Here, obviously, you want to select whatever language you're in. English, hit OK there. And then it's got to go through and install the English language site. And then the next thing we need to do is run the new list mailman command. And I'm going to use a fictitious Warren at cryptic0.com address for this, and then I'll put in a password. Okay, back down through here, we've already done all this. Now we need to run a couple of commands here, and it's saying add the following, so we'll go through and do that. Run the new alias. Next, we need to go ahead and restart the postfix service. And then we need to basically enable this in the Apache configuration. So we'll go ahead and do that there, and then we'll enable, oops. Yep, kind of lost my spot here. And in fact, I got that command wrong. So let's go back and do that again. Okay, now we need to restart the Apache service. And start the mailman service. And that concludes the fourth page. Now on to the fifth page. We have the pure FTPD and quota, and I'm actually not going to install quota in this tutorial. We'll start by doing the pure FTP. I did install quota and quota tool, but I should say I'm not planning to configure those. So a few things we need to make changes to here. As you can see, one of the things you're supposed to do is make sure that we are in a virtual troop setup. I am running standalone, and virtual troop should be set to true. Come down here and we will make a directory for our key, private key. And then what we need to do is run a command to generate that key. Here, you're just going to follow along with your own values. And this is important that I want to put in the fully qualified domain name for the server. So artemis.cryptic0.com. And again, I'm just going to use that fictitious email address. Okay, next thing we want to do is essentially chmod that file so that it remains secure and only the root user can read it. Then we need to restart the service. This section is all revolving around setting up the quota, and again I'm not going to do that, so I'm going to skip that part. Next we're going to install a bind DNS server. And then there are a couple of files down the line we'll need to modify for that. But for now, I'm going to continue plugging along on installing some additional components, some logging tools, so on and so forth. We'll go through and we'll do AW stats. And here we just need to uncomment, or actually comment out everything that's in here. So and then we want to do jailkit. And then we'll go ahead and compile a copy of jailkit. And as I was saying earlier, usually compilation takes a bit longer than your typical configuration and installation through apt-get install. Okay, so now that we've installed that, now that we've gone through and compiled that, we now need to make any dependencies for the kernel, which we're basically going to do now. And then we're going to just remove all of the files related to the install. The next package is fairly important. Install the fail to ban. This really does a nice job on preventing most of the port scans and most of the things that may have to do with a service that are malicious in intent. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I do install fail to ban. And then of course there's a couple of files we need to create for related services. So you can see pure FTP is one of those. Get out of there. I'm going to do that again. Try that again. Insert. There we go. Save it. We need to create the following filters, so we'll go ahead and VI that. And then what I'm going to do now is just make sure that this takes by restarting the fail to ban service. And it looks like it stopped and started okay. Alright, next page. We're getting there. Next we're going to talk about installing Squirrel Mail. Pretty simple. Big job. Pretty simple thing to install. First step obviously is doing the apt-get install Squirrel Mail package. Next we need to do some configuration on it. And here I'm just going to again follow the guide, so I need to do a D for I'm going to set a predefined setting for the IMAP service. And going down further, I could see that dovecot is what we actually need, so I'm going to copy that in. Press return, scroll down, and then save the configuration. Data was saved, hit a key, and then I'm going to say it's quit. Alright, saying, you might want to test it by browsing to your server's IP address, yada yada yada, and happy squirrel mailing. Yay. Alright, now a couple things I want to do though is I'm going to go back here and make it as a configured, or an available configuration for Apache 2. Recopy that. And then reload Apache 2 to make sure that it took, and it looks like it did. Now I'm going to open the Squirrel Mail configuration file and add some information to that. So I need to add some types. Go ahead, and that gets added to just underneath the mod PHP, blah blah blah, and add that. Save it, and then again I'm going to make a directory here in temp for squirrel and change the ownership on that and enable the Squirrel Mail module. And of course, it probably goes without saying that Apache will need to be reloaded because we made some changes to the configuration. And that's it. So let's test it out. You can see that you can access it by typing the following, so your IP address / squirrel mail. In my case, again, I'm going to go back to DigitalOcean, right-click, copy my IP address, paste my IP address, hit enter, and first of all, as a test, we know that Apache 2 is working, as we see the default Ubuntu Apache 2 web page. So I'm going to do Squirrel Mail, hit enter, and you could see webmail for nuts, sure, and that's fine. That's loading. We're good there. So let's go back to the tutorial. Now, some people may want to create a different type of alias for this, so you may not want to use Squirrel Mail, you might want to use webmail. And That's what this is saying. If you want to do that, go ahead and go into the squirrel mail configuration, which we'll do. And I'm going to copy the alias as he has it and drop that in. So now I've added webmail as an alias to it. So I'll save that, quit, and of course, as you may have guessed, you need to restart Apache. And now I can then go up and type webmail. I'm not going to do that. I think you get the picture. Okay, we're getting close here. I'm actually not really going to do anything with vhost right now, so I'm going to skip this particular step. And the author also made a really nice script which will run through and check as to whether or not anything was missed. And again, I highly recommend that you take the time to browse this tutorial on your own time, because there are a lot of things here that you can learn. So scroll down through this. I don't need to run this. Okay, and finally, the last step to this tutorial is we're going to install ispconfig 3. So go ahead and start this process as well. And then the actual install script. Okay. Man, I love ASCII art. Okay, so, alright, let's go through here. English, standard, fully qualified hostname should reflect what we have set, so artemis.cryptic0.com, which it is. Server hostname for MySQL is localhost, that's good. User is going to be root. Again, I don't know that I recommend using root, but you can use anything you want here. For this tutorial, I'm going to use root. And the root password, which I have here. And I'm going to accept the default on that. db-ispconfig utf-8 is good. And then it's going to run through and start to generate the private key. So in this case, okay, sorry. In this case, I'm going to do US, Ogdensburg. Oh, and I just messed up. Let me cancel out of that. Do the install again. Sorry. English standard. That's right. Localhost root. Password. dspconfig utf-8. Database already contains tables, and so what that means is I'm going to have to go and actually remove the database that ispconfig3 created. And this is actually not a bad thing. Gives you guys a chance to see if you do mess up the install. It gives you a chance to see how to actually fix it. But there's also another way to do this. I'm going to try to run the update instead of the install. Undefined variable, no, it's not going to do it. So I guess that leaves me with the option of removing the database. Great. So what I'm going to have to do is uninstall, or not uninstall, but delete the database that ispconfig3's installation created. Alright, so I created this, or I didn't create this. I visited this web page to grab the actual commands because I don't want to remember this stuff, and if you do, good. MySQL user root, so MySQL user root password. Alright, go back, grab that password again. Now I want to drop database dispconfig believe is the name of it. I'm just going to verify that. Bear with me for a second. Let's see, right there. So this is the database I actually want to drop. Alright, cool. Query okay, 75 rows infected. Infected, I guess so. Affected, I mean. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to exit, and it says goodbye. Alright, see you later. Let's do the install again. English standard, artemisscryptic0.com. Yes. Server hostname is localhost. Root. I need to grab my password yet again for my database. dbispconfig, yes, create it. UTF-8 is fine. Now let's try this again. US, New York, Ogdensburg, organization name, Cryptic 0, sounds good. Organization unit name, I don't need anything there. Common name, so the fully qualified domain name, so we're going to say artemis.cryptic0.com. Email address. And the default port of 8080 is absolutely fine, so I'm going to use that. And do I want to use a secure socket layer connection to the ISP web interface? Sure. Now I got to run through this process again. Organization name, Cryptic 0. And then a challenge password. I'm just going to come back over to my GRC tab and grab something and just paste it. Optional company name in this case, Cryptic 0. And it'll write the key, it'll restart the services, and this essentially runs through everything. Every service that ispconfig will have control over, and will make sure that everything is restarted. It'll make sure that everything is running, and as you can see, it starts with postfix and goes through all of the services. And this is what we want to see. Installation completed. Now let's hop back over to the tutorial. This has been done, this has been done, this has been done. Okay, now it's saying that I can now get to ispconfig 3 under my server, either my domain name or my IP address, at port 8080. So let's go ahead and give it a try. I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can actually see it. Get rid of this tab, get rid of this tab, get rid of this tab, and open a new tab. And my IP address is 104.236. Pop that in. Now, the one thing I should mention is that since we chose to access ispconfig 3 through the secure socket layer, you're going to need to make sure we put in an HTTPS. Otherwise, what's going to happen, and it's a pretty common one, is that if I do something like this, I am going to get this nice message saying bad request, and it looks really bad, no pun intended. All right, let's go ahead and put in HTTPS, and it's telling me, you know, your connection is not private, and essentially it's because I've done a self-generated certificate, self-signed certificate, and I haven't been validated by any certificate authorities, so I'm going to hit Advanced. And this may be different for you depending on which browser you're using, but Advanced, Proceed, and there it is. So the thing that you're going to want to do is change the default username and password for admin. Actually, you don't need to change the default administrative username, but you're going to definitely want to change the default password. But to start, it is admin, admin. And from here, you can go into Tools, Password, and Language, and then change it to whatever your heart desires. Passwords do match. Save that, log out. Let's give it a try, make sure that it actually changed from the default. So I'm going to say admin, admin, just to make sure it doesn't let me in. Bang, error, username and password wrong. Good, that's what I actually want to see this time. Admin, and I've typed my new password. And there you have it, a fully functioning ispconfig dashboard, and this will be the foundation on which we build our coin pools. Thank you for taking time to watch this tutorial, and I hope to see you around for the following tutorials on installing NOMP, installing the Redis database, installing some coins, and